You study for hours, but when you try to remember, it feels like nothing stays. The information is scattered and it's incomplete. Why does this happen? This is because what they read is not integrated with the existing related knowledge. If you want to learn effectively, you should integrate the new knowledge with the existing knowledge. And when you integrate new knowledge with the existing knowledge, you are actually forming a structured network of knowledge. We call this a schema. Once the structure forms, learning becomes faster and deeper for you. You can solve complex problems easier using the integrated knowledge. The forming of schema happens in 4 stages. The first stage is the preparation, where you create mental scaffolding. The second stage is the receiving input from different sources with multiple perspectives. And the third source is the processing of the information, where the deep integration of knowledge happens. And the fourth stage is the consolidation. So the first stage actually helps you to create mental scaffolding. In this stage, you create a design before you begin to study. The brain needs a basic framework or a structure before you begin to continue to work on a particular topic. That gives clarity to the brain. When there is clarity, you won't struggle with getting direction. When you read some material, you will be focusing more on the meaning conveyed in the text instead of thinking about whether the material is relevant or not. This reduces confusion and lowers the mental energy required for processing newer information. And you should have the overall structure of the topic in mind, for which you have to read the chapter outline, then the table of contents, or a brief summary of what you are going to learn. And this helps the brain understand where each concept belongs. So the brain will easily identify the schema for that specific topic. Once the space is identified by the brain, and it will easily store the information in that specific area or easily integrate the information in that specific area. Then another useful method is you have to ask yourself what you already know about the concept you are about to learn. For example, the flow of electricity can be compared to the flow of water in a pipeline. So this kind of analogy will really help the brain to connect new information with the existing neural network. And the second stage is receiving input from different sources with different perspectives. To build a strong schema, the brain needs to encounter the same idea in different forms. One effective method is reading concepts written by different authors. When you compare the explanation given by different authors, your brain extracts the common principles behind them. The process strengthens conceptual understanding. Your learning becomes deeper. You can easily synthesize ideas. When you synthesize and analyze ideas, and these ideas will be integrated with the existing knowledge, and this will help you build schema. Another useful strategy is dual coding. Whenever possible, combine verbal explanation with the diagrams or visual representation. The brain processes language and images through different neural pathways. When both pathways store the same information, recall becomes easier. The information will also be stored in the long-term memory. And you should also practice context variation. Try solving problems where the concept appears in different situations. So a concept you studied in chemistry may be relevant in physics. So in that case, the writers who explain the concept in physics will be different from how the writer is explaining the same topic in a chemistry. So you are getting a two different version of the same concept. So this will really help you to strengthen your knowledge, and this will help you to integrate the newly received information with a related network. So this prevents the knowledge from becoming very rigid, and that helps the brain recognize deeper patterns behind it. And the third stage is the processing. Here is where the deep integration of knowledge happens. At this stage, the brain begins to integrate the information into the structured network. You can ask elaborative questions on the topic that you learned. Why does this concept work? How does it connect to previous knowledge I learned? What would happen if certain conditions changed? These questions force the brain to process the concept deeply rather than learning it shallow. So another strategy is self-explanation. This is very much important. Try explaining the concept in your own words without looking at the textbook. This is actually the mental rehearsal. So after learning, and this kind of mental rehearsal will compel you to think about the topic. So when you think about the topic, if you get clarity about the topic when thinking, you have understood the topic. If there is no clarity, if you couldn't find the narration on the specific concept, which means there is some gap in the learning, and that will prompt you to get back to reading again, and your understanding will be deepened. So filling these gaps strengthens the neural connections involved in learning. You won't have the problem recollecting later because you have clarity. Another way to strengthen the schema is by active retrieval. Learn the topic. After learning, take a short break. During the break, try to recall what you learn. And when you recall, memory consolidation happens. So if you have time, you can also write down the topic in a paper. This forces the brain to reconstruct the knowledge network, and that will strengthen the synaptic pathways. Don't worry about the poor retrieval or mistakes while writing. If you have poor retrieval, the indication is you have not understood the concept properly, and that will help you to get back to learning again. You will get more clarity. Actually, this kind of errors or weak retrieval will signal the brain that internal model needs correction, which in fact will improve our learning. Then the final stage is the consolidation, that is stabilizing the knowledge. After deep learning, the brain needs time to stabilize the new neural connections. Immediately after studying, spend a few minutes quietly reflecting on the material or the topic that you learned. Instead of jumping into another task, this reduces interference and allows the brain to begin consolidating the information. Another important process is the spaced repetition. After learning, periodically review the material that you have learned. You recollect the topic immediately after learning. Then after 1 or 2 days, think about the topic. Then after 3 days, again revise the topic a bit. After 1 week, revise the topic a bit. This will help you to reconsolidate the ideas that you learned, and the information will store in the long-term memory. And once it is stored in the long-term memory, that will help you to come up with newer ideas, and you will become more creative learner, and for which you need to be a consistent learner. So only when you are consistent, you will think about the previous topics that you learned. Each review strengthens the neural pathway associated with that knowledge, and that will really help you to integrate the newer knowledge with that existing knowledge. In fact, the integration of knowledge will help you come up with quality ideas. You can be a better problem solver. Then sleep plays a crucial role in learning. During sleep, your brain will actually audit the information you learned. So if the information is integrated with the existing knowledge, the brain would treat that as an important idea and will retain that information in the brain. If the information is stored in isolation, it will treat that as a weak memory and it will remove that memory from the brain. This is called a synaptic pruning. Finally, the most powerful way to strengthen a schema is using the knowledge repeatedly. When a concept is applied in multiple situations, the neural network becomes more stable and efficient. So when a schema becomes strong, thinking changes dramatically. When you begin to learn something, learning is very slow. But then once the schema is formed, learning becomes faster. It becomes deep. Once you do this, you will feel you have an extra mental processing power. Thank you.